you're going to receive probably over 60% of the vote on this, and you only need 50%.
Right.
And if you were to start charging $3 from the get-go, you would only get 2.8% fewer votes.
Oh, are you suggesting?
So I'm suggesting that you will start charging $3 right away. And what assurances do we have that this will not be phased in? I see your chart.
Right. What was approved by the MTC, which would be reflected in the voter language in the ballot measures, is this phased approach. So it's a phased approach over, to 2027. And so what the voters are going to be voting on will be this phased approach, not an all at once $3 charge.
Okay, but you do need $22 billion.
That's right.
So 2030.
Yeah.
So
here in San Francisco.
You're really going to need a lot of money, and the quicker you start asking for it, the better.
Okay.
So
George is he's been serving on our Transportation 2045 task force, so he knows the figure, the magic figure, $22 billion of need, and I love that you're helping us raise even more.
I just listened to her. So.
Yeah, MTC's poll showed 55% for this phased $3, $1 plus $1 plus $1 is how they described it, and then rising to 67% support with education here in San Francisco.
Mr. Weber.
Variation on the question George asked. Will a ballot measure provide for a total of $3 in increments of $1, and $1, and $1?
Correct.
And will the ballot measure limit those increments to the dates you specify?
I believe so, yes. This is the schedule that the voters shall raise it in these time
It
frames.
suggested that possibly the ballot measure may be for less than $3. Is that correct?
I think the MTC's action was to take option 3, which was this $3 through, over the next 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
Maurice.
I find it interesting that you're not addressing one of the key issues in the Bay Area, is the fact that BART doesn't run 24/7. It is a pathetic issue that we have a subway system that doesn't run 24/7. And you're not addressing another very important and crucial issue, is that we need another bridge. A bridge that will allow for cars, trains, whatever it takes, rather than a bridge just for cars or a tunnel just for trains.
Thank you for mentioning that, sir.
And the key place to put this bridge would be from where the Coliseum was all the way to the middle of the East Bay, to like San Leandro or the Oakland Airport, because that would alleviate a tremendous amount of traffic that backs up into San Francisco, because they're all coming from the peninsula trying to get across the Bay Bridge to go to the East Bay.
It's a great point.
Those are the issues that need to be addressed.
I understand, and I hear you. I know Senator Dianne Feinstein and also Congressman Dasani have suggested this third crossing, or this extra crossing of the bridge. This ballot measure actually does include, I can't remember if it's 50 million or so for a second tube, like studies and design funds toward a second tube. The BART bond, which voters approved last year, do you remember Measure RR, which was approved last year, also included up to 150 or so million for studies of a second tube. A second BART tube is needed for many reasons. The first tube is 40 years old. It's very, very crowded. Of course, there's room going out, but companies are not locating in Oakland and the East Bay. People are still wanting to commute in. The reason BART doesn't operate 24 hours is because of maintenance. They need the 5-hour maintenance window to keep the system operating safely. So we do need a second bridge, which would allow for that 24-hour cycle of service. It would allow for redundancy. It would allow for maintenance of the first bridge. I think the second tube would also potentially be useful to have as a Caltrain or high-speed rail link, because then that would allow for commuters from the South Bay to get across to the East Bay and vice versa. BART, of course, we can't keep hanging more extensions off the current BART tube, and it only gets us to Millbrae anyway. We need to reach down into the South Bay, into the Silicon Valley. So a Caltrain high-speed rail standard gauge tunnel is also being planned alongside a potential second BART tube. So we've done some of the studies initially with MTC. The studies, this measure, Regional Measure 3, includes additional study and design money, as does the BART bond, as I mentioned. So the second tube is also one more reason for it. It allows us to have potentially another BART extension within San Francisco. Supervisor Sandy Fewer, when this came before, my board is the Board of Supervisors, so I'm the SFCTA, not the SFMTA. So I report to the Board of Supervisors, and Sandy Fewer said, if we're going to have a second tube, I want that BART extension to come to the west side. Yes. I want it to serve the Richmond or the Sunset, the whole west side. And absolutely, this is the gap, right? This is the gap in our regional rail system. So we've already begun to talk about what does that look like, but there is no way to keep hanging extensions off the existing tube.
That's for sure.
We do need to build a second tube. The debate of whether it should be a car bridge as well as a transit bridge is an important debate. That part of the bay that you described, sir, is the widest part of the bay that we have.
Yes.
MTC has studied it. They say it's not economic. They say it's very expensive. They recommend a transit bridge to invest in, again, the BART and standard gauge, which are two different gauges of rail technology. So that's the big question for us, is how should we invest in a second, another crossing? Should it be two transit bridges, a transit and a car bridge? And with autonomous and all these other trends happening, a lot of people really feel that we should probably make sure that transit works really well, and then try and figure out how to platoon vehicles in an autonomous fashion in the future.
Any members?
Yeah.
Mr. Bowman?
I've read recently that BART to the airport
Yes.
is losing passenger ship, mostly to Lyft and Uber. And so my question is, we're going to be putting a lot of investment into new transportation modes or what have you. Are we going to create a system 10 years down the line that's going to be obsolete?
Wow, that's a really tough question. It's a great question. It keeps us all up at night because we're planners and we pretend we know how to plan for the future, but it's really hard to plan for the future these days. I think for cities, we hope that autonomous will bring the benefits of safety, increased mobility for those who can't drive, and also less parking need. However, we're also worried that it will make driving so convenient and so easy and so attractive that people will just drive around all day while they sleep or watch movies or, and it'll just be this joyride, and we're worried that a car is still a car, right? Whether it's autonomous, whether it's electric, whether it's it's even if it's full with 4 people, 5 people, it's still a car. We can't, cities, afford to have an explosion of car trips. So there's a lot of hoped for benefits, but we also fear, and it's not just me, Google's self-driving car project called Waymo was telling us about Copenhagen, the mayor of Copenhagen saying, we don't want you to come, we've just spent 40 years retrofitting our city for biking and walking and transit, and we understand some people need to drive, but we don't want this explosion of driving. So for us, it's a trade-off. Now, it's certainly concerning that the Lyft and Ubers of San Francisco are now 1 in 4 vehicles downtown. We're seeing the effect on BART in the San Francisco airport corridor, and that's a huge public investment that is now starting to lose money and passengers because of this, And TNCs, or Uber and Lyft, are kind of like autonomous vehicle 1.0, right? Because they're training us to all take these car trips that are going to be self-driving in the future. Our hope is that we can nudge and push autonomous technology toward shuttle applications. I was just in Las Vegas with my boys and my family. The 4 of us went down and rode the first autonomous shuttle on public roads in Las Vegas. It's a brand new service. It's sponsored by AAA, and it's quite amazing. It runs in a sort of a loop configuration at very low speed. But our hope is that these types of services can fill in the gaps where Muni's not going to run a fixed route bus. The density is either too low, the hills are kind of difficult to navigate, or it's a nighttime service, or it's a special market like school transportation or paratransit. So our hope is that this will help extend public transit, provide first last mile service to the major rail lines. We can make those rail lines excellent, and then still extend that access and circulation in the neighborhoods with autonomous. That's the hope.
Okay.
We have two questions. We'll take,
Not so much a question, but I just find it very hard to believe your statistics, the 74%.
On the
Over
income.
75,000. All the people that I know that are commuting back and forth, it's because they can't live in the city and they have to live somewhere else, including my own children.
Wow.
One of them does make that out of 4, but yet she's a single mother of 3. So, she's trying to have a house
Right.
and she tries to take the ferry and all that, but the people I know, I work for a millionaire, all the people they hire, they're gardeners, they're secretaries, they're housekeepers, none of them live in the city except for me, and none of them
can't afford
make that kind of money at all, so I don't know if I just know this little window of poor people or what, but I just don't believe that statistic.
Well, all I can say is I got this from MTC, so I'm assuming that that's based on data. I don't know.
put that in the bag. Terry.
Tells you something.
And
But
75,000 really isn't like
A lot
a
of
tremendous amount of money for a family of 4. I mean, it's a good.
Well, if you're living on minimum wage, and the irony I see, and thank you, Mary, for giving me the lead into this, that what I see in, now we have bridge tolls increased just at the time when the minimum wage was increased. Bearing in mind that the minimum
Yeah.
wage in San Francisco and the minimum wage in California is higher than anywhere else in the country, with like the exception, I think, maybe of New York. But the problem I see is that if you look around downtown San Francisco, and actually in the area, what you see is a lot of help wanted signs, especially in restaurants and in other food providing organizations or agencies. And that's because they can't get the minimum wage workers to come into the city. People have to live outside the city because they can't afford to live here. When you talk about a family of 4 and 2 parents are working 2 jobs each for minimum wage, they're not making $75,000 a year. Okay, and they have at least 2 children, sometimes more. It's a great struggle, and if you have to add commuting to that, and now you're raising bridge tolls, you've just increased the commuting, and what you've said to those people is, we don't need you in San Francisco, because we're making it harder and more expensive for you to come here, and they are going to seek employment outside the city. And so a lot of what we look at for service businesses that actually need those kinds of services and provide us with services soon we're going to lose that industry in the city, and restaurants are a huge industry in the city.
Yeah.
But that also includes the people that are your support staff at hospitals
Right.
and at other kinds of agencies and organizations that serve us with critical services.
Right.
And so this may not seem like much, $3 over 10 years, but when the minimum wage is $15 an hour in 3 years,
Right.
okay, this $3 is already eaten up.
Yeah.
And that's a problem I see, and I think we're not looking, when you look as planners, you need to consider the social element, you need to consider,
Absolutely.
we need a
what's
question
going on
mark.
with life. And I see this as onerous and regressive.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to say, it would seem, I had my hand up too.
Well, actually, Marlon.
All right, go ahead.
Marlene, would you like to see?
One of the things that doesn't seem to be considered in planning is that you cannot increase the number of inner city streets in any. So if we build extra bridges or we build extra freeways, you can't increase the number of streets in downtown San Francisco or downtown San Jose. So one of the things you mentioned is something I've been interested in for a long time, is funding the regional express buses. And that's been on the agenda for 20 years. I think the bond passed. But we let Google and the commuter and Chariot take over that role, that money went to do express buses, particularly to bring in our low-wage workers. That would be such a great way to spend the money.
Great to
I
hear.
think.
Yeah, that's something that we are not too good at, to go across county lines.
Right.
Because we have 6 bus out, Samtrans comes in, Golden Gate, AC Transit, and the like, and we don't really share service very well. for lots of different reasons. So I think the regional express buses that MTC and everybody put into this measure are that solution. Thank you. And I think that is part of the way to address the regressiveness of bridge tolls, which we all acknowledge, is to invest it directly into particularly AC Transit, BART, ferry service, which is expensive, but it's also an earthquake resilience strategy. So we have this complex region where people are chasing housing way out in the East Bay, and we depend on these folks to be able to get in.
But you also have to look at the 24/7 issue, because
Yeah.
the people I'm talking about don't have 9-to-5 jobs.
Right,
They are there so that you get
So
your
we
coffee and breakfast at 6 a.m.
right.
They are there, the hospital shifts and such.
That's right.
So
yeah.
they can't take public transit because it doesn't run when they
At
need to
night.
get to work or home.
Yeah.
Okay, Glenn Rogers.
So we have had I think many people would agree the SFPUC has made statements that were probably incorrect in terms of the research that they have done. It would seem that you are too doing the same type of research that could be could be skewed and would allow a justification for an increase.
You mean the income again?
Yes, the income.
I'll double check for you all. This is MTC slides. I took it off their presentation, but I'll double check for you. I think that when we looked at this issue 15, 20 years ago, there was a congestion pricing study for the Bay Bridge. They also found that there was a higher than average income in the Bay Bridge corridor, which you would expect in, serving San Francisco. So, but I'll double check for you.
I think you might need a new researcher.
Okay.
Definitely. People doing it.
Yeah, but what if the statistics are correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Then what's your position
Now,
then, Glenn?
here's what we're good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
I'm
let's
sorry.
see if,
No, wait,
you
Glenn,
listened to
Glenn,
Claire.
wait.
I did.
We're gonna have to just limit it more to 3 because I don't wanna keep people too late. We'll go Penny. Eileen, Marlene, are you asking?
Lisa.
Well,
oh dear.
Lisa, I'm sorry, I didn't even see you. And Lisa, one question.
Okay, this is the fact that everything seems to be developer-driven and trying to make it pencil out for developers to increase the development in San Francisco, particularly of commercial development. And this is an enabling thing. And it instead of saying, well, maybe we should take a look at development and see if we shouldn't space our development out more so that we have a more efficient use of transportation, and that this is the wrong way.
You think this enables and
It's
exacerbates?
an enabling of this huge commercial development we have here in the city that has already almost destroyed the city.
The city has already grown 25,000 jobs for the past 6 or 7 years,
And
got to
nobody has a
800.
place to live.
So
and
I
they
think a
can't
lot
get
of
around.
folks feel like the city is very congested and we need to do something about it. We need to invest
Not
in transit.
encourage more.
So what is the right solution to the current congestion that people are experiencing and the
It's
desire for more people to go
start
transit?
moving the major commercial
Okay,
Penny,
development.
let her answer.
I would love to see all the other there's 101 cities in the Bay Area, and if the other 99 or so did their part, that would be a transportation solution.
But these are all.
No,
And I
Penny.
wish-
One question.
It's not a debate.
Yeah, and I think,
Eileen, you want a question?
yeah, it's a complex.
Yes,
Sorry, Penny.
move on.
One question.
Actually,
Eileen.
it's a comment. I was at the MTC board when the people of the Solano Transit
Mhm.
came and begged for their express buses to the city to survive. They cannot survive because of cheating in the HOV lanes. The express bus lane is at a standstill, and there's no enforcement of HOV lanes because the CHP will not allow for automatic photo enforcement. So it's also in the other, I know it's not a question, but just they're thinking of eliminating their express bus service because it's not express anymore. They're stuck.
Nick, so thank you for bringing that up. The commissioners, including Nick Josefowicz, have really pushed for MTC to look at creating its own CHP sort of enforcement unit. So, I mean, it's gotten to the point where the violation the violation rate has rendered the HOV lanes really, ineffective. And so there's really been a lack of support for adding more HOV lanes if you're not going to enforce the ones we already have. We also have clean air vehicles, electric vehicles using those lanes for free, which is a good policy if you want to encourage clean vehicles, but I personally think it's the wrong thing to do to let them use the HOV lanes. We need them for HOVs, and I would love to be able to incentivize those vehicles another way, through price or some other way. But yes, I think the enforcement issue, you hit it nail on the head, and now MTC is going to be looking at creating its own enforcement unit, and that would take some legislation. You can imagine the CHP may not like that either.
Very good question.
Are we serving them, or are they serving us?
Not HOV lanes,
No.
that's what the problem is.
Time out. Ms. Frommer.
I noticed that, of course, the Golden Gate Bridge is not on this because it's under the GGNRA, but how does that skew this entire study to say that who pays the bridge? 4% of people living in Marin County pay the bridge tolls when the Golden Gate is not even on the...
Right.
I find the study a bit skewed when you don't count the
Well,
Golden
they
Gate
could
and
be
everything
using the
going
Richmond
north.
Bridge,
The
Lisa.
Richmond and Rafael Bridge and the other state-owned, 7 state-owned bridges that this data is reflecting. Certainly, you could argue, when we did the Doyle Drive project, we showed 80%, I think 85% of commuters were from Marin and Sonoma when we did that Doyle Drive. And so the Bridge District has its own, as you know, governance where we have the tolls paying for the bus service, Golden Gate bus, and ferry service. So that's sort of off the books. It's on its own, and those fares are, I think those tolls are like $7 or $8. I don't drive that corridor, but we're at $4 and $6 on all the other seven state-owned bridges. But they did want to document the 4% because those folks want money for the Marin Narrows. They want money for Highway 101 basically, and that's right. So this was everyone pull their numbers out that were favorable to them, what your population was, what your bridge toll percentages was, what your...
I'm just saying it may skew the study a little bit.
Thank you, yeah, that's...
Well, I, because we have limited time, I'd love to listen to you more.
Happy to come anytime.
Yeah, no, this is very fascinating. So with that, I know a lot of people have questions, but I'm sorry.
We'll stay a little bit. If you like.
But we probably have to get her in the hallway or something.
Yes.
We have to do.
Oh, you have other businesses.
Yeah, we do.
Thank you very
But
much.
it's so